welcome in everybody to Wednesday. Yeah. Wednesday. Welcome into another edition of COPD Navigator House Call. My name is Mike Hess. I am a respiratory therapist and COPD advocate. I like to say they call me the COPD dude down on the old lazy river because that's a true story. We are live with our usual array of interesting things that happen here and there. Just before we got started here, one of my lights almost tipped over, so that was fun. And for some reason, the unified chat box is also not popping open for reasons that are unclear. So things are going to be a little bit different these days. However, I am still seeing some of the chats. For example, I see John Linnell, who is playing the intro music. So that is music that I got licensed and royalty free from a channel on YouTube. And give me 1 second here and I will actually, well, let's see, I'll pull up the file. It is called, see if I can pull it up anyway. It's called Chicago Strut from royalty-free old-time jazz background music. So I imagine if you go down to ye old YouTubes and search for Chicago Strut, you'll be able to find that up. And I'm glad that you find that relaxing. I'm trying to get some media on there so that everybody's not just completely staring at the blank screen, and so that everybody can remember to turn their audio on and all that stuff. We have a history of entertaining audio issues here on the old the old COPD Navigator channel. Fortunately, we seem to be doing a little bit better in that regard these days. So, yeah, so there we go. So for those of you who may be new to the program, because we have had a great many people liking and subscribing to the COPD Navigator Facebook page, and I very much thank you for that. Appreciate the support and getting the information, or getting the word out about COPD Navigator so that we can get this information to everyone who needs it. I have run the COPD Navigator group since about 2014. I was digging through the old archives and it looks like it was about May of 2013, or excuse me, 2014. So we're coming up on 6 years now of Navigator. We've been doing online video for about 2 or 3 years now. Started with a thing called COPD Navigator Live, and went into Breathe TV, which we do generally do about every 2 weeks on Wednesdays. And with the state of the world as it is with this novel coronavirus pandemic, been doing this stuff every weekday at 4 p.m. Eastern time for those folks who have trouble getting to their pulmonary rehabs and things like that. Also want to remind clinicians and policymakers and everybody else out there that COPD doesn't take a day off. I mean, I know I don't have to remind any of you of that, but COPD doesn't take a day off, and we need to remember that the elephant in the room isn't the only thing in the room. And while we have a pandemic going on, we still have people who are struggling to breathe, and we need to make sure that we are taking care of all those folks as well. So, Too Much Beer Polka, I don't know much about that. I said Chicago Strut is what I came up with for some nice generic royalty-free intro music. I was looking at maybe also we've been trying this app around the old household here called Calm, which helps with meditation and quiet music and all that kind of fun stuff. And there's some nice selections on there. I don't know what the royalty situation is, and I try not to step on any toes I don't have to. So I'm not sure we're gonna be able to go with that, but the old ragtime stuff, that'll do for now. So also want to say hello to Catherine checking in today. Appreciate you stopping by on this Wednesday. Normally, although I'm not sure, I think this is generally an off week anyway. I can't even remember at this point. They all kind of blur together. This would be the time where we would be doing our Breathe TV show, where we have some news of the week. And we have our news of 2 weeks, the bi-weekly period. I'm sure there's some kind of word for that, like biennium, except for weeks, but I don't know what that is. And we have our news stuff, and then we go into a topic of the day. We've done bronchiectasis, we've done inhaler technique, we've done inflammation, we've done smoking cessation. We do all kinds of stuff. And then we have your questions and answers. But because, as I said, of everything going on, try to make this more your time, as I bang on the microphone a little bit. Make this your time. So whatever questions, whatever comments, let's tell some fun stories. I can start us off with a good story. Last night, was able to participate in a web conference with Joe Morrison's group, the Right to Breathe folks, who did a web conference featuring Jim and Mary Nelson, of course, who do fantastic work advocating for the COPD community. Who else we have on there? We had Gene Ramos was on there. We had, who else was on there? Bonnie Adler, longtime supporter of COPD Navigator. We had Andy Barker from across the pond stopped by. It was nice to finally put a face, well, I shouldn't say put a face with that name, because we're all on Facebook, right? Most of us have showing our faces out there. So, but it was nice to have some of that interactive content. As good as this kind of interaction is, it was nice to have a little bit of that verbal stuff. And unfortunately, I had to put it off until next week, but I am looking at doing an evening version of this with some kind of web conferencing stuff, so that we can get a little bit more hands-on or voice on, I guess, if you so choose. So in the meantime, still looking for those questions coming in, so please feel free. It will take me maybe a slight bit longer to acknowledge them, because it's going to be a little bit harder. John, you were there? Were you at the 4:30 one? I don't remember seeing you there at the 4:30 one. Maybe you took in the late show. I'm not sure, but I don't remember your name popping up. So I was actually a little surprised. For those of you who may not know, John is another COPD advocate and person living with COPD from the land of 10,000 lakes. But we don't hold that against him. So, and also working with me on the U.S. COPD Coalition, which helped score a big victory lately. We've been talking about this all week. Congress, or CMS, I should say, credit where credit is properly due. CMS opted to not add non-invasive ventilators like your Trilogy machines, your Astral machines, those sort of things, to the competitive bidding process, which, shall we say, has not gone well for the oxygen world. Or if you have any kind of financial association with durable medical equipment or home medical equipment, that sort of thing. So, okay, so let's see what else we got here. We've got, yeah, usually, so that's not the right post. So, got to go over to, see, we get so dependent, or at least I get so dependent on technology, that when it doesn't go right, everything is broken. So we're gonna and boy, is that being uncooperative today. So just when you think you have everything figured out, you do not. Got to bring up the actual stream here, because I'm assuming that the chat pop-out is still not working properly. Nope. So let's see where things are. Here we go. Let's see if I have missed any comments. Fortunately, it does not look like I did, so that's good news. All right, cool. So I think probably dangerous. Always a dangerous situation when I start getting to thinking. But we've got stuff working okay so far. So yeah, like I said in the title of the show, at least this isn't tax day. We've got in the middle of a pandemic. We've got toilet paper shortages still, at least around here. I don't know how it is with you guys, but at least we don't have to send in our tax receipts so far. And hopefully some of those tax stimulus things are heading out to people so that we can get, or you can get the support that you need, and making sure you're still getting all the medications you need and all that stuff. We do still see an albuterol shortage out there, so if you are starting to run low, make sure you're getting your order in soon so that you can get earlier into the queue, and make sure you get that stuff as quickly as you can. We really just see it as a shortage of albuterol inhalers. If you happen to be on a nebulized version, or if you're able to use or interested in using the nebulized version, that might be a thing to do for the next couple of months, because the origins of the shortage come from the idea that when this whole coronavirus pandemic started, we know that the virus particles are carried on droplets, right? And of course, a nebulizer is basically a droplet generator, and so we were really trying in the hospital setting particularly to not put healthcare providers at increased risk, especially considering the lack of some of the equipment and the protective equipment and all that stuff that's out there. We definitely don't want to be adding to the risk, and so try to restrict some of the use of that, and reduce some of these aerosol generating procedures. So all of a sudden, all the hospitals needed all of the albuterol. In addition to that, and this is another thing that's popped up in our Facebook group, COPD Navigator, many folks, because for cost reasons, order their medications from overseas, particularly India. India was one of the first places that went to sort of a lockdown and transportation restriction, which meant that a lot of the meds that were made there were not available. And a lot of the meds and medication precursors, like the ingredients that go into creating these things, also come from China, which of course was locked down very quickly also. So the raw ingredients have been in shortage, the finished product has been in a shortage, and it's just been an interesting, in the old, I believe it's a Japanese proverb sense of may you live in interesting times. It's been quite an interesting dilemma for a lot of folks in the community to get what they need when they need it. That's a fun story, huh? So what's on everybody's mind today? Let's take a quick spin through, as we like to do. If there happens to be any news, this continues to be the black hole part of the lung, or the lung news cycle. Let's see here. So here's an interesting and always controversial subject of stem cells, and fortunately this article does not appear to talk about stem cell therapy, which is good. But what we're looking at, two stem cell experts. This is published on a website called Medical Express, which was kind of okay yesterday when we looked at that article. Starting to wobble a little bit more on this article because this one doesn't look fantastic. Actually found that there are, so this is, let's see, we've got Frank McKeon, Professor of Biology and Biochemistry and Director of the Stem Cell Center, which I'm not familiar with, but usually that is not a fantastic thing when you're leading with the stem cells. And Hua Sean, which I'm probably not pronouncing correctly, a research associate professor at that center, used single-cell cloning of lung stem cells to make their discovery. The discovery appears to be 3 variant stem cells in people with COPD. One produces tremendous amounts of mucins, which are one of the components of mucus. The other two drive fibrosis and inflammation, which together degrade the function of the lung. This was a report in the, what year is this? So it's published today, coming up in the May 14th issue of the journal Cell. So this was apparently a peer-reviewed thing, which is a little bit better. These patients have normal stem cells, though not many of them. They are dominated by the 3 variant cells that together make up the disease. So we do know that we're seeing where do I want to go with that? We know that the damage that's done does happen at a cellular level and can affect cellular reproduction, and it's kind of like mutations and things like that. So looks like what we're seeing here is along those lines. This was accompanied by the University of Connecticut health pulmonologist and critical care doc who gathered the stem cells from lung fluid while performing bronchoscopies. So what we're looking at is this does appear to be some very preliminary research, and again, this is kind of at the root level of it, where they're not necessarily looking at these stem cells as therapy, which is good, because that still is in the snake oil phase of care, of research. But the idea that these lung stem cells we may be able to identify what has gone wrong with these cells gives us some hope for some additional therapy. A key point that we're taking away here is that it says, despite its accounting for more deaths than any single disease on the planet, relatively little has been written or understood about the root cause of COPD. And I think that's an interesting point, because oftentimes we lump together things like cancer, but lung cancer is arguably distinctive from breast cancer, brain cancer, all these things. And even inside of the lung cancer umbrella, there are various kinds of those. So it's an interesting way to put it. Maybe if we start moving toward using that kind of philosophy toward advocacy, then we might be able to make a little bit more progress. Right now we focus in on the fact that even with all these umbrellas and stuff, COPD is the 4th leading cause of death in the U.S. and 3rd globally. But if we start looking at it as causing greater mortality than any other single disease on the planet, maybe that's a little bit more attention getting. So maybe we're getting something good out of this, of more immediate use than just trying to figure out what we do with the stem cells. So quite remarkable, says this Dr. McKeon. In the deep lung, the distal airway cells give rise to okay, so they're finding that they have located some of the cells that can help regeneration, potentially, theoretically. Lots of caveats there. Interestingly enough, this started coming about in studies of subjects recovering from infections by an H1N1 influenza virus that was nearly identical to that one that sparked the 1918 pandemic. So I suspect that, that was 2011, so that was in the late 2000, the aughts, I guess we're calling them, the 2000 single digits, when we had, was that bird flu or swine flu? I think that was the bird flu. So some of the research that came out of that has put them down this pathway, so that's pretty interesting. Yeah, so again, this is a peer-reviewed thing in a fairly reputable journal. I believe Cell is pretty reputable, published by twice monthly. So the print article is going to be coming out in the next couple of weeks. So the reason I'm really doing kind of the deep dive into the legitimacy of any stem cell article is because there are a lot of places out there that don't use the peer-reviewed stuff and make a lot of kind of wild claims about what we're doing with stem cells and what they can do and all that. So anytime the idea of stem cells comes up for a conversation, we have to be very, 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 very careful about what we're claiming that they can do, what we're claiming that they might do, and all that kind of stuff. So this again is a very preliminary article that talks about some of the base science behind it and is not ready for therapeutic stuff. All right, so I want to go back to Catherine's question here. What shots do they use to help you breathe better? And if it makes you breathe better, then why wouldn't more people get it? So I'm not 100% sure. Not 100% sure where you're going with that, but I'm gonna take a whack at it and let me know if I'm getting close here. So, there are a couple of different ways we can look at it. A lot of times, when you have a symptom flare, an exacerbation, increased symptoms, and you end up going to the hospital, end up going to the ER, what have you. You tend to get either an IV or an injection sometimes, stuff like that, of a systemic steroid, usually prednisone. Most people know, as soon as I say prednisone, everybody knows what we're talking about. So prednisone is a very powerful anti-inflammatory, but when we are looking at systemic steroids, we see that they have a lot of side effects also, and that's generally not good. So we try to avoid those kind of shots whenever possible. There are times where they are absolutely necessary and so on and so forth, of course, but that's why we try to avoid those as much as possible. We also see in the asthma world these days, there are some injectable biologics. Things like Dupixent, what else we got? Nucala, Xolair, Fasenra, and Syncare in our handy-dandy poster of stuff. And these things have been shown to reduce inflammation in asthma. They have not been as successful when we're talking about the COPD world. There have been some clinical trials that have been done that haven't shown them to be as effective or as efficient, and so they don't necessarily get that indication, and so that's why we don't necessarily use those in these settings. Now we also have to take into account the idea that there may still be subsets of people, and we've talked about this a couple of times, where they may benefit. If we get the overall picture of who is in the study, it may not be positive. But if we can drill down and identify common groups, well, phenotypes as we tend to call them, we might be able to see a little bit better results with certain of these phenotypes, certain groups of people. So the jury is not entirely out on these injectable biologics, because there are starting to do some more studies with a little bit more better selection process and that sort of thing. But again, they haven't been to be effective, and they can have some side effects and all that sort of thing. So that's why we don't give all of those to a lot of people. So I don't know if that's entirely answering your question, Catherine, but if it's not, let me know, and I will do what else I can. We'll head over and see Mendo real quick. Welcome back in. Checking in on Facebook instead of YouTube today, so switching it up just a touch. This is legitimate research. Yes, we're going back to the stem cell stuff, and that's what I was really trying to draw the distinction between, because when you see something in a legitimate, peer-reviewed, objective, relatively objective thing, then that's a little bit more trustworthy than going onto a website, and a fancy website, and seeing all the claims and all that stuff. Legitimate research, there's a big difference between differentiated stem cells and the undifferentiated cells from fat used by the quacks. Absolutely, absolutely. In most of those cases, they're saying that they can draw cells from your adipose tissue, and they do some kind of washing or filtering or hocus pocus, whatever, and they get stem cells out of them, and then I think they have you. I think they nebulize them. Speaking of nebulizers, and all that stuff, and then they put that back into your lungs and supposedly help you regenerate. And but that's absolutely true. This is legitimate research, and that's why I was trying to point that out there. So. Oh, I unmuted the wrong thing today. So that's fun. Halfway through the show, discovering you were probably hearing me okay, but maybe not as high quality as in general. So that's fun. Always an adventure when you're not a media person by education. I am self-taught, and that often shows very clearly in a lot of this stuff. So I appreciate everybody bearing with me, and one of these days we will do better. I will say, I will, if I say so myself, things are going a little bit better than they have historically. And that's why I feel comfortable these days asking people to share some of this stuff, and hoping to spread that word so that we can all work together to get people more aware of COPD stuff. Looping around again. So So, as somebody is mentioning that this content isn't available on one of the places we shared it. So sometimes we can blame it on Facebook, and I think this is one of those times. At least it should be set to public. Yeah, set to public. So, I don't know. But it is a little bit strange that I'm not seeing as many comments and stuff. We've got a pretty good crowd according to the... Oh, there we go. All right, so I see that, yeah, so, okay, so just, there's a lot of Facebook glitchiness today here, so we're going back to Catherine. I'll find it was posted in a group. I had a friend that had it done, but she had leukemia, so that might have been more along, if you have blood conditions, not so much leukemia, because that's more of a white blood cell thing, but if you have anemia and things like that, you don't have enough iron in your blood, then you often have trouble carrying oxygen. And so this goes back to the whole thing where you're getting injections and they help you breathe better. Shortness of breath has many, many, many different causes. There are lots of, the most common thing that we think of in COPD is you've got air trapping, or you've got the bronchospasm where you're wheezing a lot and all that kind of stuff. Those can be relieved with a lot of with certain medications. When you get into the oxygen delivery problems, you're still not getting enough oxygen. But in this case, it's not necessarily because you're not moving enough air. It's because you don't have enough boxcars to carry the oxygen from the station out to the cells where they use the fuel. So when you have blood disorders and things like that, that can be more of an issue. And the shortness of breath, the improvement of shortness of breath is actually kind of a side effect of fixing whatever the blood issue is. So that's not exactly the same thing here. So Gloria asks, I've heard an N95 mask is better for the virus than the N95. Your opinion? My opinion is that outside of the hospital, should only be surgical masks, because we're still experiencing a very dramatic shortage of equipment inside the hospital. I know people who are reusing these masks that are not designed to be reused, sometimes for days, and I've even heard stories of weeks at a time because there are shortages. So I would not encourage anybody outside the hospital to be wearing either one of those right now. I guess if we're looking at specific answers, theoretically, the N99 might do a better job. I worked at a facility where that's what we had was N99s. They fit a little bit differently, and so they were a little bit easier to fit to somebody, especially somebody who has facial hair. But realistically, when you're outside the hospital, we're still looking at the surgical mask. These days, the cloth mask, perhaps. Um, I know that's the CDC guidance is to be doing the cloth masks and that sort of thing. Um, I don't know exactly how I feel about that, but it is what it is, I suppose. Um, so the answer is kind of it depends about whether we're using the scientific answer or whether we're using the practical answer. And the practical answer is, of course, go with the surgical mask. And yeah, it's working. I mean, it's accepting comments, but it's a little bit difficult to for me to see the comments sometimes. I'm usually it's a little bit more of a solid flow and everything updates normally. I'm actually having to go through and reload the pages manually to see all the questions, so it's just a little bit more of a challenge at times. So I'll take a chance here to say hello to Valerie checking in. I appreciate you saying hello. Also want to give a shout out to Jess Sutherland and Maddie Howard on a break on the front lines of COVID across the state from me. Jess is a recent graduate of one of our fine respiratory programs here in the state, and she and Maddie are working hard to, the east side of the state right now is where the action is at. My thoughts and prayers and everything else, good vibes, everything goes out to you guys right now. Thank you for, first off, for taking a moment out of your break to say hello. Really appreciate that. And you are very welcome for the knowledge. And again, if we were in an audience right now, I'd ask everybody to give a round of applause, because I love the fact that my RT colleagues are really getting a lot more attention right now. It's unfortunate circumstances, of course, but I really like to see everybody who has stepped up and accepted the challenge. So hats off, Jess and Maddie. Thanks for coming by. Stay safe. Stay as safe as you possibly can. Here in the next generation, we need you to replace the old stodgy thinkers like me. So take care and stay safe. Let's see what else we got going on here. So yes, reload. Also, oh, what happened to the sound? Did the sound change, or is that just an old comment from when we were switching over to the microphone? All right. So Gloria mentions thanks using the surgical right now. Honestly, I will still maintain right now the best thing you can do is stay home. I know it stinks. I know we're all at this point, all across wherever you're coming from, most likely you're getting a little bit stir crazy. I was talking with somebody this morning who hadn't said that they hadn't left their house in about 40 days. I know that it's challenging right now, but particularly those folks in the COPD community, the risk is just too great right now. When you go out, a surgical mask may help, but they are generally designed to see the whole idea is it's along the same lines as the idea of everybody should get vaccines. The flu vaccines and the pneumonia vaccines, and even going down into the childhood vaccines, because there are a certain number of people who can't get them. Of course, they have sensitivities, allergies, all that stuff. But the idea is, if we can inoculate everybody and we can kind of eradicate that from being in the community in general, then we protect those who can't use the thing, or in this case, the vaccine. So the idea with the masks is very similar. Because we know that there are a lot of people who don't demonstrate symptoms and who may never end up demonstrating symptoms, but can still transmit the virus. We're trying to get That's the idea behind everybody wearing a surgical mask, because those things help keep the aerosol droplets in. Cough, sneeze, even when you breathe, or any of those kind of things. That's preventing that from going anywhere. It's keeping it with you, but you're already contaminated, so to speak, or infected. It's preventing you from spreading it to other people. The CDC actually has a decent graphic about this, where my mask protects you from me, and your mask protects me from you. But if you aren't wearing a mask, this mask does very little good. Surgical masks aren't really designed to keep stuff out so well, especially if they're, I've seen about every wrong way you can wear a mask. In the last couple of weeks, um, I saw one person at the store. It was covering the mouth, but not the nose. And then for a while, I went down a different aisle and then came back around. This person had just gone all the way completely down, and then it was back up. And it was like, what's even the point? Um, Surgical masks, um, where they're just kind of propped up here. There's no seal here. There's no seal here. I've seen just about everywhere, every which way you can do it wrong. I've seen it. Ways that I would never have even thought of before. But in any event, and also I know I've been very bad, and I've just been touching my face through the whole thing. So do as I say, not as I do. Um, so until we can get everybody wearing the right kind of mask, I have concerns about there being kind of this false sense of security. Like I said, this is not going to protect. This mask does not protect me from the stuff out there. It protects me from contaminating anybody else. So if everybody's doing that, then we're in decent shape. But of course, not everybody's doing that, and even many people who aren't doing it properly. So whether it's effective at all, I have a lot of questions about that. So, Gloria, I'm glad to see that you're staying home. Keep your hubby safe, though. I mean, we've got to make sure that we're protecting the caregivers and all those folks too, because we don't want them to bring stuff in and then turn it around and give it to you. So it's a challenge. It is definitely a challenge. So let's see. We did another reload. Hopefully we can get where we're at with Melanie saying thank you to RTs. Appreciate that. Robin saying hello, waving. Appreciate that. Let's see what else we got. I think we've scrolled through. Okay. So yeah, kind of a glitchy hump day for us here on the old house call, but powering through nonetheless. Also, a special shout out to the folks watching on Twitter out there. That's why I kind of glance a little bit up sometimes. We've got a Twitter feed going now, which is fun, and now everything is stuck. Well, isn't this lovely? If you have questions, I will get to them momentarily, because now there we go. Let's say a great deal of Chrome has frozen up. Here we go. Craig saying hello to everybody. Just saw that come through. So appreciate you stopping by, Craig. And Jessica saying stay safe. Appreciate that. So now we're getting a little bit more reloads and all that stuff. So hopefully. Oh, what a weird day this is. What a strange, fascinating time to be alive. So while we're waiting on all that stuff to reload, let's see if we can find. Here we go. So Peggy can't even get the right kind of mask though. Are you saying a homemade cloth mask doesn't help? I have my doubts. I mean, again, I hate to explicitly go against the CDC in general, but the CDC has been making some very unusual decisions about this stuff, and I'm not a big fan of the idea of changing the rules because to fit the situation. We know there are certain things that help and certain things that don't. And while it's very true that a lot of people can't get the right mask, I don't know that it's a great idea to be promoting a lot of that stuff because, again, we've talked a lot in the last couple of weeks in particular about details matter. I mean, we talk in COPD about not every COPD is the same. So should we have a little bit more careful measuring with our careful determination of who's in a study? Spirometry is important, but it's high quality spirometry is even more important because if you have crap spirometry, you're going to make bad decisions. I'm not a fan of the idea of just saying wear a mask because, as I mentioned, when you tell people to wear a mask, there are a lot of folks who just do it wrong, even with good intentions. Just like we don't teach people how to use their inhalers properly. If you're not teaching somebody how to use a mask properly, it's not going to work. So a homemade mask can work, I guess. And, again, as long as you have an understanding that the homemade mask is not going to protect you from other people. It's just not. I mean, it's just not. And I don't, and I worry that the communications from groups like CDC promoting that are giving people the wrong impression that they are going to protect you. And I don't believe that they are. I mean, there's so much variation in the type of material. I mean, even in the different weaves of even if you just look at, okay, cotton cloth, I mean, there's so many different weaves and all that sort of thing. Do you I've seen people talking about putting vacuum bag filters and stuff like that on there. I mean, is that effective? I mean, a lot of this stuff we don't know because we never really anticipated running out of stuff. So we didn't study a lot of it. We may find in the future, if we go in the aftermath of all this, we go back and look that maybe the cloth masks were effective. But I think it's a stretch to claim that right now because I don't think that the data we have is supportive of that. Maybe I'm wrong, but and if somebody wants to weigh in, if we've got a textile engineer or somebody like that happen to be picking up on this, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm wrong. But that's my opinion. I would not particularly recommend it. I mean, I would recommend it in the sense that you're going to prevent people from going out. I would recommend somebody like me maybe wearing one because I might be asymptomatic. I am at low risk for exposures because I've been staying home. I've been careful, but I have had to go to the store. I've been the designated store person so that we don't, knock down more than one person in the house. So I have gone to the store a couple of times in the last few weeks. So it's entirely possible that despite my hand washing and despite, all the other precautions that I've taken, I could be infected right now. So I am the kind of person that should probably wear a mask. And had I masks, I would be wearing them. I've been wearing, especially when the guidance came through that you should be wearing something. I've been doing scarves and things like that because I don't even have any cloth masks right now and I don't know how to sew. But when I'm giving advice to somebody who is trying to protect themselves, I want to be very clear that it is not the best idea for your own protection. So I don't know if that's a yes or a no to Peggy. I don't know if that's a yes or a no to your question, but that's how I feel. Like I said, I want to be very clear because I don't think a lot of the health communication that has come out during this pandemic has been very clear. And I think that is very unfortunate. So we've got probably about another 10 minutes or so. So this is a great time to get some of the last questions in here because it's probably going to take 10 minutes to get through all the reloads and all that stuff. So let's see. Thank you. Tough question. We are now required to wear masks in Maryland in order to go into any retail stores. And yeah, and so that, there's a lot of places where, of course, if it's a requirement, then it's a requirement and you got to do it. but how much of it is a requirement because it makes us all feel better, and how much of it is very effective? I Well, you know how I feel. No need to belabor that point anymore. We'll do, as we're waiting on any last questions coming in here, we'll scroll through and see if I can find any more. Um, if Google will, or if Chrome will cooperate at all. Wow, this thing is being really goofy today. Well, at least we got through. We were still able to power through and still able to get a lot of stuff going here, so that was pretty cool. Okay, so here we go. Here's a couple other questions here. Do you think the CDC promotion of preparing for a zombie apocalypse a few years ago may have backfired? No, I honestly don't. I mean, you got to have some fun with some of this stuff sometimes. We knew that this kind of pandemic was probably inevitable. I mean, people knew that this. I mean, this is a thing that happens. We had, if some of the stories are to be believed, this happens about 100 years, every 100 years. We had the 1918, what they called the Spanish flu, which didn't really come from Spain, but that's besides the point. I believe there was some kind of pandemic in 1820-ish. So, we know this is going to happen. We know this stuff happens, and we know that we do need to be prepared for it. So, we were caught kind of with our pants down a bit with some of the supply chain stuff, I think, and that's been kind of the biggest issue. A lot of these stay-at-home orders have been because the analogy I saw was, McDonald's serves, let's say they serve 1 billion hamburgers a year. So their organization is designed to sustain 1 billion hamburgers, but over a year. If I were to go into one of the McDonald's here in town and say, I need 10,000 cheeseburgers, I need 10,000 quarter pounders, they're probably going to be overwhelmed, and it's going to be a real issue. And who knows how long it's going to take for that to happen, for that order to be complete, because I'm overwhelming that at one time. 10,000 is obviously far less than 1 billion, but there's a time scope involved in that too. And that's kind of what's happened with that's why we keep talking about this whole flattening the curve and all that stuff. Overall, we may have fewer cases of the flu than of the flu, or less mortality, fewer deaths, all that stuff, but they're happening in a much more abbreviated window. And that's kind of overwhelming the system right now. And that's why we're running out of stuff. We're running out of ventilators, we're running out of masks, we're running out of gloves, we're running out of all this stuff, because we could have it, but we need it all right now, and we're not set up for that. So I don't necessarily think that promotion kind of backfired, or because I think it was probably for a different kind of thing. It's been a couple of years since I've looked into it exactly what it was, but I wouldn't say that it backfired myself. Bonnie says, or asks, if you wear a face shield, should you still wear a mask? Probably, because again, it's going to depend on the type of face shield that you're doing. Usually when I think of a face shield, there's kind of a medical thing where it's right here, but it doesn't do much over here. And if air currents are coming in, it doesn't do much from under here. And if air circulation is coming up, then it's still coming into my face. If I have a face shield on and somebody sneezes on me, then yeah, it's probably going to stop most of it. But for ambient stuff, again, depending on the kind of situation you're in, depending on the kind of room you're in, I mean, there are a lot of variables there. And again, that's one of those things that isn't really addressed very well by some of the guidance and the health communication that's been put out there, because we don't have, honestly, we don't have a great way. It's hard to summarize all that stuff. It's real easy to say, wear a mask. It's a lot harder to say, wear this kind of mask in this situation, wear this kind of mask in this situation. If you're in a certain kind of room, Maybe you should wear, if you're in a smaller room, maybe you should wear an N95. If you're in a bigger room, maybe a surgical mask would be okay. If you're outside, then, and if you're 6 feet away from people, and if you're 12 feet away from people, we start going down that whole list. And, I know from my public health education, people lose interest. I mean, this is boring stuff most of the time. I mean, this is, or we kind of have that whole overconfidence of, well, I know how to fight this stuff. I'm a grown person. I know how to be safe around the flu and all that. And we kind of have a false sense of our own capacity. I've been there. I've underestimated things before. Um, so it's not a one size fits all answer, and I know it's not very satisfying, but yeah, if I was wearing a face shield, I would probably still be wearing a face mask. I mean, I'd still be washing my hands. I'd still be trying to avoid touching my face before washing my hands. I would still be having hand sanitizer around for when I don't have soap and water. You still have to do all of the other things in order to get that maximum protection. It's not necessarily a one or the other solution. So like I said, I mean, it's not a satisfying answer. It's not not an easy answer, but it's also not it's a complex situation. It's not a simple thing that can be just rung up in one or two sentences. So, and yeah, Bonnie says, yeah, guidance has been sketchy at best. And that's a thing that has been talked about a couple of different times is, we see. So yes, I mean, things can be sketchy. Oh, and I see I've gotten off the page here, so I'm not shoot. There we go. Things aren't necessarily sketchy for malintent. People are often trying to do the right things, all that kind of stuff. So I see what's going on. There are some issues here. So as Mendo points out, N95 masks won't protect you when you have facial hair, preventing a seal. Yep, absolutely. That's why we have these things that are called PAPRs. They're air-powered things that are this whole big hood with usually having a clear part to it. That's what I was tested to wear when my last time I did a fit test. And then, in the outpatient world, we actually did away with some of those and at certain clinics. So it hasn't been, again, we haven't really thought about a lot of that stuff. Craig, yes, I am going to be on tomorrow, tomorrow at 4 o'clock. Yeah. Oh, Karen's here too. Okay, cool. So this has been, appreciate John pointing all that stuff out here. I don't even know what's going on because on the actual video now it's saying something went wrong. We're having trouble playing the video. Don't know if the watch party's still working. Don't know if the internet's still working at all. Who knows what's going on right now? That is, as Genesis might say, this is the world we live in. And these are the hands we're given. So, with all that said, ending on the note of sketchy guidance, but also saying hello to Mendo and what else is going on here? Now things aren't clicking again. We're going to go ahead and wrap things up for today. We will be back tomorrow. Hopefully we will be doing a little bit better with the tech stuff. I have no idea how much of it is connection. I don't know how much of it is speed. I know we've been having a lot of issues, people watching a lot of Netflix lately and a lot of all that stuff going on. That's taking up some bandwidth. Oh, we want to stay on that page here, so we're trying to get to, just want to make sure that I'm covering everybody's bases here and not leaving anybody out. So here we go. We'll try to skip back here. As I said, we are doing this every weekday, 4 p.m. So we'll be back on Thursday and back on Friday. We'll be back all next week. We are locked down here in Michigan until April 30th, so I will be here for you. And I really appreciate everybody who has been here for me and for the community. Recently hit 200 subscribers on YouTube, which is fantastic. And again, thank you very much. And I believe we just went over 500 subscribers or likes or what have you on Facebook. So I really appreciate everybody taking the time to create that engagement. Because of the way a lot of these social media algorithms work, the more engagement we have, the easier it is for other people to find it. So I appreciate that. Also, those of you who may be tweeting, check us out on Twitter. All that said, I appreciate everybody spending some of your Wednesday here with us. Take care of yourselves, take care of each other, stay strong out there as you're staying home and staying safe. And I will see you tomorrow. Until then, keep breathing easy and stay strong. Take care, everybody.